Now, you guys have just come off stage in the main stage to talk about the piece of work that we've worked on together, which is how a promise to the customer gives advertising campaigns the edge. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, I think, the journey that we went on, how we started to think about a possibly new mental model and a heuristic. But before we do that, and also what we found, but before we do that, I'd really like to just get, like in 30 seconds or thereabouts, why we started on this. What was the problem that we felt, that needed to be solved? So we're going to go Roger, and then we're going to go Jan. What was the problem that you thought we were trying to solve?
I think it was the challenge to branding and building brands over time from a push towards kind of online demand capture and away from brand building, and why that had happened and how we could help companies with that.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but I'm going to go next to Jan. Jan,
so
what was the problem we were trying to solve?
Here's the problem. Brand is incredibly important. It's incredibly important B2C, everyone knows that, but it's probably even more important in B2B. And the issue is, if you take 10 marketers and you ask them what their definition of brand is, you'll get 11 different answers. So it's a very important thing, but it's not using the right language to make itself heard with people outside of marketing, particularly the C-suite. So we need a new mental model for brand building that people who don't care about brand building actually understand.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot in what you say, and I'm going to come back to that. But I just want to, Roger, in what you were saying, just talk a little bit about the experience that you have had in brand over the last 40 years. And when you advise CEOs, what is the sort of problem that they think needs, that you think they're grappling with, that meant that this piece of thinking that we did was helpful?
Sure. Yeah, I think a couple things. It varies by the kind of client that I have. As Jan said, many in B2B don't conceptualize what they have as a brand. Even though they understand they have loyal customers, right? They don't think of it as a brand, and then don't think enough about how to build that over time. They often think that sponsoring a golf tournament, that's branding. So that the very sophisticated ones like Procter & Gamble, who I've worked with forever, understand and revere branding. But even in the more sophisticated companies, this idea of, well, we know when we pay for clicks that we're getting something for our branding kind of dollars, that is taking away from, here's how we should think about spending resources, time, energy, money on more fundamentally building the value of our brand.
Yeah. So Jan, you are obviously the founder of the B2B Institute. I think it would be fair to say that the worldview of the B2B Institute is that brand building is the biggest untapped opportunity for B2B businesses. So given that that's the mission, how does this piece of work fit in to that scope? And what is the problem of brand in B2B? Because I think you're right. I mean, maybe there's a kind of completely heretical view that says in B2B, you think brand is important in B2C, but in fact, are kind of mentally, we're awash with all these kind of ideas of products and services, even when we don't use them. That's rarely the case in B2B. If brand in B2B is a signifier that somebody else took a chance on this and it didn't go wrong for them, maybe it's even more powerful. So you are, I think, 4 or 5 years into being an incredibly strong advocate of brand. Why are we now taking this kind of direction into a promise to the customer, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 words that doesn't include the word brand?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research at the B2B Institute with a lot of partners, including the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, with WARC, with other key players in the industry, to prove out the specifics of how do you build a compelling brand in B2B. But what we haven't done yet is bring this to an audience that's outside of the immediate circle of marketing. So in many ways, a promise to the customer is a way of talking about everything we've done in a kind of umbrella fashion and package it up in a way where a CEO or a CFO or a head of sales or a COO can understand what we're trying to do without us having to use the jargon of marketing. Because I think that's one of the biggest issues that the marketing industry has. One of the biggest issues the marketing industry has is that we talk in this echo chamber of marketing jargon to ourselves, to each other, but no one else cares. You know, the people who come to Cannes are the ones who care about brand. You know who doesn't care about brand? Everyone else who doesn't come to Cannes, which seems to be quite a few more people than the ones who are here today.
Yeah. Roger, we're in a really difficult and different economic macro than we were, I think, 18 months ago when certainly we first met.
Yeah.
What does that mean for how CEOs and CFOs are thinking about brand investment? And do you discern that they're changing their opinion about where they can afford to place their bet?
Well, I mean, this is like most times when you start draining the water out of a river, the rocks start to show, and it creates a greater choice point, I would say, for CEOs. Do they really believe that building something for the long term really is worth it or not? And if not, they are economizing, if you will, on brand building expenditures. I think the smart ones are saying, now's the time where others are going to do that, and we will use it as a time to lengthen our lead. But there you have to have sort of a model in your head that says, here's how we want our customers to feel about us. And then there's a set of things we have to do to have them feel that way. And we're going to do them because that makes business sense for us. If you don't have that strong conviction, you'll say, could we cut this without anything disastrous happening tomorrow? Answer, yes. Okay. Let's cut that. Yeah, like Procter & Gamble, for example, could, I think, double its profitability by just eliminating advertising for a year. But
very tempting.
If they didn't have the kind of leadership they have, it would be very tempting. Because they have the kind of leadership they have, it's unthinkable,
yes.
Right? Because you have to invest in the long term, and any part of your customer franchise that you sacrifice for the short term is going to be doubly hard, even more, to get back in the future. But what's unthinkable for somebody who has that view of the importance of our relationship with our customers, for as many of there are ones who say, hey, that's a quick way to make our quarter.
So we have a situation where the word brand, with which I think we are all, myself included, huge advocates, has a translation problem in that it means many different things to many different people. And those people who believe that brand is the biggest opportunity out there, particularly for B2B businesses, are trying to reframe the idea of brand as something simple. And the thesis that we came up with is a promise to the customer. Now, we didn't just kind of pull that out of the ether. We spent some time thinking about it. Maybe, Jan, you can just talk a little bit about why, we were quite careful not to try and reinvent marketing. Marketers don't need new stuff. In fact, marketers know exactly very well how marketing works. A promise to the customers, the thing that you were saying, it's something that speaks to other people. But if I were to take the contrary view with you and say, look, you just invented this kind of crazy idea, tell me why it should matter to me, how would you kind of defend the promise to the customer concept as within the scope, not outside the scope of what marketers currently do?
First of all, a promise to the customer doesn't replace anything that marketing already does. So we're not trying to compete with any other mental models. What we're trying to do is simplify it and translate it in a way where other people who don't care about the topic of marketing and brand building that much actually can relate, and they don't get themselves off the hook and say, well, that's marketing's problem, or that's the brand person's problem, that's not my problem. Right? It should, the CEO, the CFO should know what they are promising to the customer and how they're going to deliver that, right? Everyone within the company should know that. And so it's important to remember that this doesn't compete. This is something that is a translation for people who need a very simple mental model to understand how value gets created, because the moment you tell them this is about brand building, they're trying to find a way to cut budget or to reallocate those resources, because this is not a world that they understand.
So can your grandmother understand it? Can your CFO understand it? If you can hit both of those, then you can.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so then we set about working with
Can I also say on that, if you can say it to your customers, and rather than being offended, right, they will actually be pleased.
Yeah.
That's a good test as well.
Yeah.
So when you talk to customers about performance marketing or demand capture, they're like, what am I, a target, right? Whereas if you say, here's what it's about. Here's about us making a promise to you about something you care about, and then us going away and fulfilling that promise for you. How does that sound? I don't think any customer is going to say, well, that's a terrible idea. You're exploiting me. No, it's good for them. So I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah. And don't you think, Mimi, that it's hardwired into our brains to understand the concept of a promise in a way that a lot of other concepts are harder to translate or harder to understand?
There's something in it. If you make a promise to me, there's something for me in it. And that automatically, from a sort of serotonin level, makes that relevant to me. If you give me kind of like 40 words that have nothing for me in it, then it's more difficult. Now, just in the time that we have left, let me summarize what we found in the research and how we set that about. So we worked with Walk, who are the data partner for Cannes Lions. We essentially looked at 2021 case studies for either awards winners or awards entries. We found that 808, that's 40%, had a promise to the customer at the heart of them, and 60%, so something like 1,200, didn't have a promise to the customer. And then we compared, because the campaigns have the metadata to allow us to do that, what the impact was on both brand health measures, promise to the customer versus not, market share, customer gain, market penetration, and then higher, longer order brand health and long-term sales. This is the experiment that we've done, and the white paper is on our website, or you can go to Walk, and I thoroughly recommend everybody who's watching to have a look at the research, because if you're a marketer, it will give you something actionable. But I think what I would like to ask each of you is, we found that when you make a promise to the customer, you are, by no narrow statistical margin, but by a significant margin, more likely to improve your brand health metrics, your market share metrics, your penetration metrics, and your long-term brand and sales metrics, no matter what size of campaign you were. When we compared the big ones with the big ones, the promise to the customer campaign still did better, and that we saw across there. So we see this really clear picture. I'd just like to ask each of you, I don't know if we've discussed this, but what finding did you find was most arresting, most surprising? What surprised you most? So I'm going to go with Roger first, and then I'm going to go with Jan. What did you find that really surprised you?
Well, I'll do a general and then a specific. The general one was magnitude. I had a suspicion that the data would support the hypothesis. I had no idea it would be so off the charts huge, right? So much so that I now would say, if you're not making a promise to the customer in your ad campaign, don't run it. Save the money, do something else with it, because you're just being incredibly wasteful. It's that extreme, the results. But the micro one that was more striking is the one where we judged it against the work hierarchy, and it helped understand why the world hasn't figured this out already. It's because if you just look at the narrow metrics for the campaign, that campaigns are usually measured on, what was our kind of reach and our recall and all those metrics, it was about even.
Yeah.
Right?
And you can delude yourself that that is a great...
That was great, we did great. But then as you went up the hierarchy to the ever more important things that you would actually care about and make a difference to the business, it was total domination by a promise to the customer. So I was intrigued by that because it explains why we haven't figured it out. If on non-promise to the customers, even those metrics were horrible, then people would stop doing it. But they're attracted to keep doing it because it looks like this was good, it met our metrics, and it's hard to judge. Because it's an opportunity cost, it's hard to judge, while meeting our metrics, we spent money, time, and energy on something that had no long-term payoff, but we only figured that out 5 years down the path. So that's why we have what we have now, which is 60% non-promise to the customer campaigns, when I think our data shows clearly that's a dumb idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you were very interested, I seem to recall, in one of the early pieces of the analysis, which was around what is the relationship between social media and PR buzz and long-term brand health? Because in many, many, many decks that are post-campaign analysis decks that somebody's put forward, they're kind of a proxy for each other. And I wondered just talk a little bit about the finding that, I think that was the one that if you had leapt out of a bath and ran down the street and said to people, it might have been that one.
So what's fascinating about the difference between promise to the customer and non-promise to the customer campaigns is that non-promise to the customer campaigns actually do much better when it comes to creating short-term buzz. And it sort of intuitively makes sense. You can have a celebrity, you can have a funny mascot, you can have a joke. All of those things make sense in terms of garnering attention. And it's okay to have those things, but you need to tie it to a promise, because the promise to the customer is actually the kind of broccoli and chicken protein as opposed to the empty calories from candy that is going to provide sustenance and nurturing to your brand health and your sales growth in the long term. But in the short term, if you only look at very, very fleeting campaign measures and sort of temporary measures, then of course you won't be able to tell the difference. And I think that is often very emblematic of how the marketing world is trying to get attention and create value, is by doing stunty things that make a big splash in the short term, but they don't actually drive long-term sales results. And unfortunately, that's often what gives the function a bad name or doesn't make it credible with other parts of the business, because we need to be aligned with other parts of the business in terms of what is the long-term promise that we make to our customers and how do we deliver them. Well,
thank you very much. For anybody who's more interested in some of the findings, and I really urge you to look at the white paper, and please look on the B2BI website or the WARC website. And I'd just really like to thank Roger and Jan, and to leave you with this final message, which is that if you want to optimize your campaigns in a way that gives you some form of greater confidence that your strategy is working, put a promise to the customer at the heart of it, and the three of us would back you absolutely all the way. Thanks very much.
We promise.
We promise. We promise.